When my husband got accepted into law school, I cried harder than he did. I thought it was the beginning of the life we'd always talked about. I had no idea I was about to spend the next 3 years helping him build a future that he eventually decided didn't include me. My name is Janelle. My husband Darius and I had been married for 2 years when he got his acceptance letter. Becoming a lawyer had been his dream for as long as I'd known him. The problem was money. We weren't broke, but we definitely weren't in a position for one of us to stop working for 3 years without feeling it. And I had dreams too. I'd been talking about starting my own event planning business for years. I'd even started putting money aside. But when Darius got into law school, we sat down at our little kitchen table and made a decision. He would go first. I would keep working. And once he graduated and got established, it would be my turn. Darius reached across the table and squeezed my hand. 3 years, baby. After that, I'm taking care of you while you build your dream. Then he smiled. I believed him. So I put my plans on hold. I worked full-time in an insurance office, and whenever overtime was available, I took it. Darius had some student loans, but there were always other expenses: books, transportation, fees. Then he needed a decent suit for interviews. There was always something. We stopped taking vacations. We stayed in our small apartment. And the money I'd been saving for my business slowly became money we used to get through law school. But I wasn't bitter about it. Darius wasn't sitting at home doing nothing. He worked hard. There were nights I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and find him at the kitchen table surrounded by books. And he appreciated what I was doing. At least, I thought he did. Sometimes I'd come home exhausted and he'd have dinner waiting. He'd rub my feet on the couch and say, "Just wait until I'm making lawyer money." I'd laugh, "You better remember me." And he'd always say, "How could I forget the woman who got me there?" That became our little joke, except I wasn't joking. By his final year, things were already looking up. Darius landed a position at a large firm that would begin after graduation. The salary was more than either of us had ever made. For the first time in years, we started talking about houses again, travel, children, my business. It finally felt like everything we'd postponed was about to start. Graduation day came. I sat in that audience and cried like the degree was mine. Afterward, Darius found me in the crowd, wrapped his arms around me and said, "We did it." Then he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "This degree has both our names on it." I believed that too. Darius started at the firm a few months later, and almost immediately, things started to change. At first, they were good changes. He bought better suits. We went to restaurants we used to walk past because we couldn't justify spending that much on dinner. He started meeting people who seemed to live in an entirely different world from ours. Lawyers, executives, clients with money. There were work dinners, networking events, office parties, and Darius absolutely loved it. I was proud of him. Then one night, I brought up my business. I'd found a small commercial space I thought could eventually work as an office. Nothing extravagant. I just wanted to start seriously planning again. Darius barely looked up from his phone. "Are we talking about this already?" I laughed because I thought he was joking. "What do you mean already?" "Darius, I've been waiting 3 years. He sighed. "Can we just get settled first before we start discussing this?" I reminded him of our agreement. He said he remembered. He just thought we should wait another 6 months. So I waited. 6 months later, there was another reason. We should focus on buying a house. Then his workload increased. Then he thought it would be irresponsible for me to leave a stable job while we were trying to build savings. Every reason sounded reasonable by itself. But eventually I realized something. There had never been a perfect time for Darius to go to law school either. But we made one. For his dream, we'd figured it out. Suddenly, for mine, everything had to be perfect. And it wasn't just that. Darius was changing. He started criticizing things he'd never cared about before. Our apartment was embarrassing. My car was falling apart. The restaurants we used to love were suddenly cheap. He wanted to move closer to the city. He wanted different friends, different experiences. Sometimes I felt like Darius was trying to erase every piece of the life we'd had before he became a lawyer. I just didn't realize yet that included me. About a year after he started at the firm, Darius came home one evening and told me we needed to talk. I knew immediately. Nobody has ever said those words before delivering good news. He sat across from me and told me he wasn't happy. He said we'd changed, that we'd grown in different directions, that he loved me, but he wasn't sure he was in love with me anymore. I couldn't believe my ears. Then I asked him, "Is there someone else?" He looked me directly in the face. "No," I asked again. "Darius, is there another woman?" "No, Janelle." He said this was about us. He moved out 2 weeks later. And I spent the next 2 months trying to understand how a marriage that had survived 3 years of law school couldn't survive 1 year of success. Then I saw Camille. She was an attorney in the same firm as Darius, beautiful, polished, successful, and standing beside my husband at a charity event in a photograph someone posted online. His hand was on her waist. There was nothing ambiguous about it. When I confronted Darius, he didn't even deny they were together. He just insisted they hadn't started dating until after he'd left me. Maybe that was true. To this day, I don't know. But I remember looking at him and saying, "You keep telling me when you slept with her like that's the part that hurts." He stared at me. I said to him, "I worked while you went to school. I put my plans on hold. I spent my savings. Every time I asked when my life could start, you told me to wait." He told me that wasn't fair to say. Then he said something about how neither of us could have predicted how much we'd change. And that's when I finally understood. Darius hadn't simply fallen in love with somebody else. He had fallen in love with the person he'd become. And I reminded him of the person he'd been before. The tiny apartment, the old car, cheap takeout, student loans, struggling to make rent. I belonged to a version of his life he didn't want anymore. Camille didn't. She was already part of the world he'd worked so hard to enter. During our divorce, Darius and I had one final conversation. He admitted that when he started at the firm, he began looking at his life differently. He wanted more. And he said he realized we didn't want the same things anymore. I actually laughed. Of course we didn't. He looked confused. "I don't even know what I want anymore, Darius. I spent the last 4 years wanting whatever would help you." He went quiet. Then he told me he would always be grateful for everything I'd done for him. And that made me angrier than anything else he'd said. I looked at him and said, "Funny. You weren't ashamed of me when I was working my ass off to put you through law school." He didn't answer. At that point, there wasn't really anything left to say. The divorce was finalized several months later. And no, I didn't walk away with nothing. We'd built our life during our marriage, and I took what I was legally entitled to. I also took the money I'd managed to save, and finally did the thing I'd been talking about since before Darius ever stepped inside a law school. I started my business. Small. Much smaller than I'd once imagined. At first, I worked from home. Then I started booking enough clients to rent a little office. My business didn't become some overnight success, but for the first time in years, I was building something that belonged to me. And more importantly, I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for Darius, not for the perfect time, not for someone else to tell me it was finally my turn. Last I heard, Darius and Camille aren't together anymore. People expected me to feel some kind of satisfaction when I found out. I didn't. By then, I'd finally stopped measuring my life against his. I thought I was helping my husband build our future. Darius graduated. He got the career we'd sacrificed for. He got the life we talked about. And then he decided he wanted to live it with someone else. For a long time, I thought the lesson was never to sacrifice for someone you love. I don't believe that anymore. Sometimes love does require sacrifice. But I learned something else. Never spend so much time building someone else's dream that you forget to build your own.